Greetings. I'm Dr. James Hayes-Bohanan, a professor of geography at Bridgewater State University, sometimes also known as the Coffee Maven. And I'm here to share with you a little story about the coffee I had last weekend here at our weekend house we call a whaling house. And I will begin by showing you a photo of myself with a cup of coffee last weekend. Nothing too unusual here. Person with a cup of coffee. This is a little model whaleboat in the back we have here at Whaling House. We call it Whaling House because one of my hobbies, aside from drinking coffee, is rowing whaleboats. And here in Fairhaven, near the ocean, I often join friends in a couple of different whaleboat clubs that I'm a member of. Not during the COVID-19 lockdown. We don't row right now, but as soon as it's over, I'll be back out on the water. But anyway, we call our house Whaling House, and we're here most weekends. And we always bring coffee with us, of course. And here last weekend, I'm drinking a cup of coffee, and I posed with it here to prompt a question that a lot of my students and friends might have. It's like, why is there milk in that coffee? Now, there's not a lot of milk in that coffee. It's not cream, but it's kind of unusual for me to have milk in my coffee at all. And this little video is to just discuss why that is. I will start by showing the coffee as I was preparing it. There's the cup in my Chemex there behind, and then Mint Invaders from Chocolate Space mint chocolate chip ice cream coffee. I'll just say something about the package. This is a coffee with that's in a triple layer airtight package with a CO2 valve on it. So this is something I always look for in coffee. If it's coming in a flexible package like this, I check to make sure it has a little valve about the size of a dime in the packaging. In this case, it's on the back. You can't see it here, but I know that this is allowing, helping to keep the coffee fresh because it's keeping the oxygen out and letting the CO2 escape. If we did not do that with flexible bags, they would just rip open because an interesting thing about coffee, once you roast it, and if you put it in an airtight container, that container will rupture because coffee for about the first 24 hours after roasting will give off carbon dioxide, and that will expand the package. So we can't just leave it out though, because it also will take in oxygen. So this is a flexible package. This is sort of unusual for me to have coffee of this kind, and I want to talk about, first of all, why I have that. When we bought our little weekend house here in Fairhaven, it needed paint. It had been painted black and white, and we needed to it needed a paint job. And so we were thinking about just repainting it as it was. But then talking with my wife, Pamela, I said, you know what? You've always dreamed of having a house that was mint chocolate chip. We always notice them if we're out for a drive or a walk and we see a mint chocolate chip house. Pam would often say, oh, that's what I would like. So we got the house painted by a local friend a tall man who's able to paint the whole house without a ladder because it's kind of a short house. Like I said, it's a little house. His twin brother, by the way, is a wood carver and carved that nice whale for us. And so this is what we call a whaling house. This is a photo that I took of the house before we got the solar panels on. This is a completely solar powered house at this point. Anyway, it's mint chocolate chip. And so when the Facebook algorithms said, Dr. James, you need this bag of mint chocolate chip coffee, I thought, you know what? I never have mint chocolate chip coffee. I never have flavored coffee. I've probably not had flavored coffee voluntarily in at least 10 years. But, you know, it's too tempting to pass up. So I ordered some and had it sent to me. And in a previous life, before I became really devoted to coffee farmers, and the flavor of coffee, this would have been fine. Back in the day when I went to sort of ordinary commodity coffee shops, like Dunkin' Donuts, I would often have the flavored coffee. If coffee's not very good, the flavor can kind of hide that fact. Um, but if coffee's really good, flavoring just sort of takes away from it. And so I usually drink very good coffee. Most of the coffee that we have in our home or in my classes is, it's all organic fair trade coffee. Most of it from cooperatives in Nicaragua, and most of it roasted and brewed at home. So that's what we normally do, and that's a whole separate story of how we make the coffee. I'll probably make a little video of that as well. But flavored coffee is an exception. An unusual thing about flavored coffee is that Pam and I, long, long ago, before I had any dream of being coffee maven, we had a small part, we played a very small part in the fact that there is so much flavored coffee in our country. We were graduate students at Miami University of Ohio, located about 30 miles north of Cincinnati. And while we were there in my second year of graduate school, Pam's first year of graduate school, a coffee company down the road in Cincinnati held an experiment on our campus. And here's what happened. The coffee company was Folgers. It was owned in those days by Procter & Gamble, which is based in Cincinnati. And they noticed something. They noticed that among younger customers, people were drinking less and less coffee in the morning and more soft drinks. And they did some studies and figured out that this was because the coffee tasted bitter. And so they decided we should try to do something about that bitter coffee. Now, one thing that Folgers could have done would be to try to get better coffee. Either that didn't occur to them, or it did occur to them and they decided not to do it. And there's some reasons for that too. The first one is it costs more money to get good coffee. The second is that Folgers, like most companies, even coffee that's not that good, has an established flavor that people expect. And so any kind of change in a major brand like that is pretty unlikely. So in any case, they thought about finding a way to have coffee more appealing despite the bitter taste. I'm going to stop showing the image of this and just come back to my porch. So they're like, what do we do to get people to drink the coffee? And so they decided that they would offer flavored creamers. And so they developed some creamers, some powdered creamers, and they decided to test them. And since young people were the target, they decided to find a university. And Miami University was and still is a pretty traditional mainly undergraduate university, kind of near their headquarters, and in a place that's not where most of the students live on campus. And there's not a lot of traffic back and forth to the campus. It's kind of a very stereotypical idea of an isolated college-age population, more or less isolated. So they decided this was the place to study. And what they did was they put coffee out, Folgers coffee, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2 months. They made the coffee available all the time in every building. And next to each of the containers of coffee that they put out, catering containers, they put creamer and chocolate creamer and mint chocolate creamer. And they did this for 2 months, and it's a story. I'll include a link in the blog post that will go with this video. I will include a link to Pam's coffee story, which tells some of the interesting details of how that experiment went. But the bottom line was, hey, young people will drink the coffee more if it has flavoring in it. And so from that time on, pretty much any time you find commodity coffee in the United States, like at a gas station or at mainstream coffee shops, there will be flavored creamer available, and a lot of people will take advantage of it, and it might be the first thing on their mind. Now, in many cases, the flavoring would now be roasted into the coffee, but in some cases, it's still an added pack that's available. Now more in a cream form, but it originally was all in powders. And so we say we help to make the world safe for bad coffee. And years later, when we really started to learn about coffee quality, I felt kind of bad about this. Not that we drove that experiment, but we did participate. We took advantage of that coffee. Now, I drank all the coffee black during that whole experiment, but Pam did prefer the flavored creamers back then. Since we've gotten better and better coffee in our own house, Pam doesn't really drink the flavored creamers anymore. And actually, both our whole family, if we're out and about and we have coffee, if we've been offered coffee and it's not quite as good as what we would like, we might add a little cream, and that's a hint to other members of the family. This coffee isn't so good. It's not terrible. If it's terrible, we won't drink it. But if it's on the margins, we might put a little cream in. Now, this coffee from the aliens, this mint chocolate chip, and I don't know what mint chocolate chip has to do with aliens, but Bones Coffee Company, which have been thanking them in advance for being good sports about this, they put out this coffee with that kind of motif, the alien motif. And I want to explain a little bit about how that would come about. Coffee is rated just like wine, and a bigger coffee company will have a variety of different coffees that they sell, and often they will have both higher grade coffees that they sell as single origin or as special blends, and then they might acquire some other coffee that's not quite as good, doesn't meet the ranking points for specialty coffee, but they still have it. There's a market for every bean. They have this coffee, and if it is still usable but not the highest quality, I know that in some big roasting companies they call that flavor base. What they mean is this coffee is not strong enough for us to put our name on it, a strong enough flavor. By strong, I mean strong quality. It's not a flavor we want to put our name on as is, but it's good enough that if we add the syrup, it will taste good enough. It won't hurt the syrup. So what happens is after the coffee is roasted, it gets put in a big bag. The one I saw at another major roaster was 800 pounds, and they dump, I don't know, probably a couple pounds of the syrup into that. And they shake the bag until all of the coffee beans are coated, and then it can be roasted that way. The flavor then comes through in the final cup. And I suspect that the coffee that I got from Bones, if it hadn't been flavored at all, would have been perfectly adequate, and I could have had it black. But now I have acquired a distaste for the flavoring itself. So even though the first pot or two or three of this coffee that I made, I drank it just black, after a while I was kind of tired of the flavoring. And so I had a little cream. You know what I found out? Mint chocolate goes much better with cream or milk than it is as a black coffee anyway. So I should have been doing that all along. It makes it more like a Christmassy dessert than an actual cup of coffee, in my humble opinion. But anyway, that's why I had cream in my coffee last week, and that's a little bit about where coffee flavor comes in. And I am back to my Nicaraguan home roasted free-range coffee this week. I encourage you, if you're interested in coffee and learning all phases of coffee, consider taking my Coffee Week class. It's open to all. It will be online this year, and we will be bringing in coffee experts from all over the hemisphere to help us convey the whole coffee story from seed to cup to roasting. And we will hope to see you online. Bridgewater State University, Coffee Week, June 2020. Look at coffeeweekbsu.blogspot.com and learn all about it.